when things go wrong, you do not hide under the covers. You go deal with it.
Hello. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast, presented by Hippo Direct. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, digital marketing due to Hippo Direct, and you can reach me at max@hippodirect.com for help using your podcast as a marketing tool. This is episode number 96, and today's guest is JJ Ramberg. JJ is the co-founder of Goodpods, one of the coolest podcast listening apps you will come across. Before that, she started some more good and very cool businesses and also served as the host of MSNBC's Your Business for 13 years, where she interviewed everyone from Tony Hawk to the founders of Peloton and Warby Parker. Let's let the Goodpods roll. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with JJ, the entrepreneurial jet plane, JJ Ramberg, the co-founder of Goodpods and the queen of so much more. JJ, how you doing today?
I have never heard that before. JJ, the entrepreneurial jet plane. Love it.
Yeah, you flew into that one.
But a bang. Hi there. I'm so happy to be talking to you.
Yeah, this is great. Shout out our mutual buddy Ryan Folland, the king of the 313 challenge, who connected us in the first place. And ever since he introduced us, I've not been able to put down your amazing app and platform, whatever you want to call it. But Goodpods, as obviously a person who's interested in podcasts, it's a really new fun toy. It's so really cool what you're doing. We're gonna get into that later, but to start us off today, you have had a hell of a career on TV and in the podcasting world, interviewing some of the coolest people and entrepreneurs out there. So my biggest question to start us off is there anybody that you were starstruck by?
Oh, starstruck. It's funny. I don't get starstruck that easily, but what I was is sort of entrepreneurial struck. I don't know if this happens to you, but I fell in love with every single guest I had. When you talk about to entrepreneurs, right, they're so dynamic and have all these cool stories. And I left so many interviewers thinking like, oh, I want to be like you. I want to be like you. And it wasn't just the Jack Dorseys of the world, right? Or when I interviewed him early on, who built these big companies, but rather, like the smaller companies of these people who just took such incredible risks and didn't have any landing to go to if it didn't work out. I just, they're so dynamic, all these people. It's really amazing to get to talk to so many of them.
It is. Yes, that's so true. I mean, I think there's, no matter who you interview, there's that natural glow during the interview and afterwards, that kind of glow effect where you're like, wow, that's so cool. This person is so awesome. And I think, yeah, I've experienced it. I'm sure you've experienced it to the extreme. There's really something you can learn from every single person you talk to. So I just find that staggering.
Have you been starstruck by anyone?
So there's this JJ Ramberg character that I...
We're in the middle of it.
yeah, we are in the middle of it. I can relate to the point that I think when you get ready for an interview, you get in the zone. And so once you have your routine down, and pregame routine or whatever you do to get your mind right and get in the mode of interviewing, because that becomes such a consistent thing, it's hard to get too rattled. But I would say for some people that maybe more off the map, or people that don't do as many public things, those maybe you get a little bit more butterflies in your stomach because you don't have as many resources to prep from or things to take into consideration. And there's kind of a more question mark of where the interview can go. But sometimes those, as you were mentioning, sometimes those more bizarre or unique stories turn out to be the best stories.
Yeah, so often. And again, to your point, right? Other people haven't heard them yet.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you're not starstruck. I know you're very starstruck talking to me right now, but besides that,
Very.
Yes, I'm flattered. Thank you. When you look back to the podcasts and programs that you had for MSNBC and all of the the huge name entrepreneurs, but also just the really cool lesser known entrepreneurs that you discovered, who comes to mind? I mean, are there a few names that jump to the top as the most memorable, or maybe even most surprising people that you've talked to?
For me, I interviewed entrepreneurs for 13 years for my show. And there's this one woman who started a bagel company. She was in Connecticut. She hadn't had a job before. Her husband had lost his job. They had, I think, $10,000 in savings that they had inherited from someone. And she just had this idea for these low fat bagels, and she risked it all and started this company and went door to door and was so, she wouldn't take no for an answer, and she grew her company out of nothing, had no business experience before, and then grew it into a national company. And stories like that really got to me every time there. And I heard so many of them, but those were the people that I thought, wow, whatever, I want to have a little bit of what you're having. I'm so impressed with your ability to take risks and your optimism, and just how you keep going. That those were the people that I was really just wanted to surround myself by.
And I think it's an added bonus when, I mean, you talk about having what they're having when it's actually bagels. When they're in the food industry, then there's some added bonus as well. Can you characterize what it's like traveling around the country to interview people as opposed to kind of the modern way of everybody interviewing remotely?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, you step into someone's life. So we did a series for your business about main streets around the country, basically saying what makes some main streets tick and how come some of them are still falling apart, basically. And when you get there and it is completely different than just talking to somebody on the phone or talking to someone on Zoom. You just immerse yourself in the culture and the small businesses and all of the connections between the small businesses on Main Street. It's different, right? You're surrounding yourself by it.
And how does that impact the actual interviews?
I think you get to understand things more. So if let's just say an interview I did with a shopkeeper in Natchez, right? If I'm in her store, I can suddenly see, oh, here's this sign up where it's advertising something for the nail salon down the street. How did that happen? And then you get into a whole story about the relationship between them and the nail salon, and why did this happen, and how is this helping Main Street, and how is this helping the town. I would have never seen that if I were just on the phone. I wouldn't even have thought to ask about it. You just get more of the details.
There's definitely something to be said for the environment that you're in. And so you are someone who's incredibly comfortable and used to being in front of the camera and in front of the mic, or behind the mic. I guess that's behind the mic technically. But you have always had this interest in entrepreneurship and the startup world and starting businesses. Turn around now and you've started multiple businesses of your own, and in a range of different spaces. How did you get into this entrepreneurial world or realize this passion in the first place?
I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. Both grandfathers were entrepreneurs. My father, my mom, my brother. I married one. And so
Of course. Well, they probably wouldn't let you marry anyone else.
yeah, I think it's in my blood. I mean, particularly my mom was a stay-at-home mom, full-time mom when I was growing up. And then when she was in her mid to late 40s, she started a company, and I worked there. My sister worked there, my best friend there. But I really had a front row seat at an age where I could really pay attention to what was going on, to her starting this company, which she started with my brother. And I think that had a big impact on me, seeing her start something from zero. And then it was, in the end, very successful.
So you were clearly learning from an early age and surrounded by so many great entrepreneurs there. If you had to dumb it down to one lesson, which I know is always a terrible question, so I'm sorry, but if you had to pick one entrepreneurial lesson that you learn from your family or that you see keep coming up and up and up again, what would that be?
It's not a dumb question. As you can imagine, as having interviewed entrepreneurs for 13 years. I get it a lot. And I think the lesson is that you have to be okay with failure. They're not successful because they went to the right school or they have the right connections or they have the most money or they're an introvert or an extrovert. The one that I see consistent across the board is when things go wrong, you do not hide under the covers. You go deal with it.
Yeah, that's so true. That's something my father who started this company actually the year I was born, that's something that he instilled in my brother and I from an early age is that guys, it's okay to fail. Like you need if you're going to be scared to fail, there's only so much you can ever achieve because, you're never taking that risk. And so it's amazing that it's consistent in your family and so many entrepreneurs outside your family that you've spoken to as well.
When I spoke to so many very successful entrepreneurs, people like John Foley from Peloton, and so many people told me this when I had my podcast, which was go down. What's the worst case scenario, right? What would happen if, and take yourself down to the worst case. And oftentimes it's just not that bad, right? Still have food on your plate, if you still have a roof over your head, and maybe you can go get yourself another job if all else fails. If you talk about the worst case scenario, it is much better than just fearing the unknown.
It is. Yeah, and it really puts things in perspective. And on that entrepreneurial note, I want to talk about a little bit of the good before we talk about more of the good. So, all good puns are welcome, I'm sure. And Good Shop. So, you guys started that, I think it was 2005.
We
What?
did.
Cool. Okay, cool. I did that checks the box of my preparation. I'm set now. Where did this idea come from?
So Good Shop, which we have now, which is a coupon company where a percentage of what you spend either goes back to your favorite charity or back to yourself as money back to you. It originally started as Good Search, which also still exists, but we changed the name of the company. And the idea there was search engines, I think at the time were making $6 billion. It's obviously been well eclipsed by that now, but
Yeah.
and we thought, what if we could redirect some of that money to good causes? And so we made a deal with Yahoo and we put a skin on Yahoo and we called it Good Search. And you could pick a cause, any cause in the world. And then anytime you did a search, a percentage of our revenue would go to this cause. All CSR campaigns were pretty much around one thing, right? You buy a red t-shirt and it goes to HIV research, or you buy lipstick and it goes to breast cancer research. There wasn't really anything out there back then where you could choose any cause that you wanted. And so that's why we launched Good Search. And it was quite successful. It started really quickly. On day 2, we had revenue coming in that we got to all the causes. And then 2 years later, we launched Good Shop, which was every time you shopped, a percentage of what you spent went to your favorite cause. And then we launched the coupons, which became a part of Good Shop, which is now the main part of the company now.
Wow. So you guys are clearly you've found your niche here in the kind of aggregating from a selection of different, whether it be shops or resources or other forms of entertainment or content out there. But I think those ventures started really with the idea of charity and giving back in mind. At the time of this recording, how much money have you raised for charities to date? Do you have a running estimate?
I do. It's about $14 million.
Holy cow. Well, congrats on that. That's incredible.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's exciting. And we added cash back. So now you can choose between it going to a cause or a cash back, because the truth is, I think cash back is incredibly socially responsible too, right? If people can save money, it can be used in all kinds of ways that are important to them.
Let's get to Goodpods, which is how we connected in the first place. Goodpods, for anybody who's not familiar with it yet, you should go download it on your phone and check it out right away. It is awesome. For anybody who's interested in the podcast space, whether you enjoy listening to podcasts, whether you're a host, whether it's both. I know that was proper English. I've been checking out Goodpods, this monster that JJ and team have created. And it is so cool to see what your friends, what your family, the podcasters who you like listening to, how they find their inspiration in podcast form. And you've really made podcasting such a social thing. So it's really, really cool. Got a very sweet and, of course, good name as well. So, how did you, obviously, you were in the good space already. How did you come up with good pods? Like, where did podcasting factor into this?
Sure. Well, two ways. So the idea behind Good Pods, very simply, is that you can follow your friends and influencers and your favorite podcasters to see what they're listening to. So if you know Goodreads, it's like Goodreads for podcasts. The reason we came up with it is twofold. Number one, I founded this with my brother. He was also my co-founder in Good Shop. And we are both avid podcast listeners. But we found that we kept going back to the same podcasts, or I'd be ready to go out for a run and want to listen to something new. And I'd call him and say, what should I listen to? And if he didn't pick up the phone, I had to call someone else. And if they didn't pick up the phone, I'd spend my whole running time actually searching for a podcast, right? Which was and so on the listener side, I just wanted an easy way to know what my friends are listening to. On the podcaster side, I had a podcast, which was a compendium to my MSNBC show. It was called Been There, Built That. And I found that it was hard, even with a network machine behind me, and even with a decade-long loyal television following, I found that marketing a podcast was an entirely different thing. And so I wanted to create a way for podcasters to grow their audiences as well, defy that word of mouth. And so we launched Goodpods.
Bam! It was just like that overnight. Yeah, well, it seems like it started from you guys really scratching your own itch in an area that you're already passionate about. So it's natural to create a business in that space. So that's really, really neat. I think when I started exploring good pods, the thing that stood out to me that was totally game changing was I've just always, and I'm obviously a big podcast fan as well, but I've just always associated podcast listening with once you find your shows and the podcasters you like and the content you like, a lot of times there's that loyalty there. And so you'll have your, anywhere from 1 to 12, or for some people even more, shows that you'll listen to, and you keep going back to those same shows. But what you guys are doing is totally breaking that mold and changing the game, because it really creates the opportunity for one-off listening or just to discover so many different shows through the app like that. So are you guys banking on people changing their listening habits and really more focused on kind of like listening to one episode of a new podcast as opposed to staying loyal to a podcast the whole time?
No, I think we're banking on both, right? You will have you'll have shows like our fans here, right? They're going to listen to every episode that you launch here. But there's also 30 million episodes out there. And so there might be shows where you're not going to listen to that show all the time, but there's one episode that your best friend knows that you will love, right? And so they're going to recommend it to you on Goodpods, or you'll just see it in your feed. So I think you will have shows you're loyal to, and then you will kind of cherry pick episodes. So, I mean, if I look at I'm just looking at my feed as we're talking right now. But so yesterday I listened to Poetry Unbound. It's a podcast I had never heard of. I saw that my friend Hillary Richards had listened to an episode of it. I'm personally not a huge poetry person, but I was going for a walk and I saw Hillary had written something nice about the episode she listened to. It was 8 minutes long. And so I listened to it. It was great. I personally probably will not be going to this podcast all the time, but I loved this one episode. And now I'll probably go back, when I feel like listening to poetry again, I'll go back and listen to another episode at some time. I think the point of this is you get introduced to things with a very low commitment. I don't need to go back to every show, every episode, but there are lots of episodes of lots of shows, or individual episodes of lots of shows that I will love. I just wouldn't find them unless a friend of mine recommended it, or I saw it that an influencer who I respect listened to it.
I think there's something to that low commitment, and you guys have made it where you can even now listen in the app. So it's literally all that's at your fingertips. And it's so easy to see something and go, oh, check that out. All right, I'll check it out right now. What would you say has been the biggest hurdles that you've had to tackle in the process so far of launching this app and also educating consumers on a new way to listen and socialize about podcasts?
Design is incredibly important. And so that has been a challenge that we faced, right? So we had to make this app look great. It has to be friendly, it has to be easy to use. And we're still working on it. I really, I've got to say, kudos and a shout out to our design team because I think they did a wonderful job. I get happy every time I open it, but we're still pretty new. And so there are things that we are learning from our users, things that we thought were intuitive that are not intuitive. And so we're just constantly changing things on the app. And there are features that people are asking for that we're now putting in. So I think the biggest challenge is frankly time. I wish I had an engineering team of 1,000 because I want
Right.
everything done yesterday, right? I can see where this app is going and I'm so excited about it, but it's hard to be patient to get everything in there.
I'm sure it's a constant journey of wins of highs and lows as you're building this out, and obviously there's so much design work as you said. Can you share some small wins that you've had along the way that have caused a lot of excitement, whether it's just be something that you're actually seeing with people using the app or whether it be something on the back end of getting it ready to be in front of people?
Oh yeah, no, I very much know my wins and what gets us excited every single day. So we have on app, you can see when your friends have listened. So anytime I listen to something or any episode in the whole app, I can see how many of my friends have listened to it. And so early on, when we just had this idea that people would like to follow their friends, right? You never actually know if it's going to work until you get a product in their hand. But early on, somebody on the app listened to this show called The Art of the Exit. And the episode was about $100 million art heist. I watched as this podcast episode got passed from friend to friend to friend. And I know because it was a pretty random podcast that the majority of these people had never heard of that podcast before. I would venture to say none of them had, except for the original listener. But it worked, right? So, like, this girl Kippy listened to one, and then her friend Spencer saw that she listened to it, and then he listened to it, and then his friend Tucker listened to it because he saw Spencer listen to it, and it went on and on and on through the community.
That is so cool seeing it bounce around like that, especially being something you created. I think it is an app and a platform that gets more and more cool the more friends and family you have on it. Because all of a sudden, these are more and more people you know, and you get to actually and actively see what they're listening. And you've really taken word of mouth and turned it into podcast form, which is amazing.
Well, you know what's really fun about this is when I listen to something and then I see friends have listened to it because they saw me listen to it, I got to say there's like a little, I get excited about that, right? Because here's something that I loved and now I've shared it with all these people and they like it too. So it's really the whole friends listen to part of it where you can see who's listened to it is really really fun. I'm just looking right now on my feed again. So there's an episode called Can Optimism Be Learned? And I found it from my sister who had listened to it the other day and then I listened to it and now I see all these other people have listened to it too.
It's unfolding right before your eyes.
It is. It's really fun.
So when you take a step back and look at the overall vision, what's the biggest thing you want to achieve with Good Pods?
I would love to surface up more great podcasts and content. So, what I loved about being a journalist is that I got to dip in and out of different worlds. We talked about that a little bit earlier. And I think of podcasting as the same way, so that I can go through my day and I'm like, oh, you know what? It would be cool to learn something new in science. And so go see what my friend Gordon listens to because he likes science. And oh, you know what? I feel like doing something for my soul. And so let me go see what my friend Lisa listens to. And I wouldn't be able to do that or I wouldn't frankly do that because it's too time consuming if I didn't have it at my fingertips. right? I want to dip into science, and then I want history, and then I want a storytelling podcast. And I don't want a huge commitment necessary to any of those, but I want a quick, here's something cool to listen to. I think once we do that, we get to take these, and excuse the word because sometimes it's annoying, but we kind of get to go on this journey, right? This audio
Oh,
journey.
I'm
We
just
get
kidding.
to learn where we get to learn all kinds of things. We get to travel through all of these different worlds. And then on the podcaster side, there's so many people who make they do these great interviews or tell these amazing stories. And just because they don't have huge marketing dollars, they're not getting noticed by all these listeners who would really gain so much from hearing their podcasts.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so there's multiple sides to that. And on the podcaster side, you know, there are over 1 million podcasts out there. And there's no question that there's so many amazing podcasts out there that just aren't figuratively, seeing the light of day or getting nearly as much exposure as they should, just because, there continues to be so many podcasts and you're competing with much larger budgets and promotion tactics, as you said. So it's really cool that you're unearthing so many of these podcasts as well. And so it's going to be exciting as Goodpods goes on to see what becomes the viral of podcasting, if you will. Like what becomes something like your example of being listened to over and over again, and just what flies through the app and is tossed around the app from friend groups to friend groups.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily the ones that you think, right? It's not a lot of people listen to the top ones, the Daily, Joe Rogan, etc. But the ones that viral are often just these ones that come from friend groups. We had a podcast called You Need to Calm Down, and the episode was just white noise. It was just white noise. And that went
Like
viral.
actual white noise. Oh my God.
Actual white noise. And that went viral. Someone else did one on uncluttering your space, and that went viral. And so it's these episodes that you just would not find any other way, except for that you saw that your friend listened to it and liked it.
I think it requires, and this is a good thing, I think it requires you as a podcast host, or if you're somebody who's publishing podcasts, to think even more creatively with the name of your episodes and what your episodes are actually about. Because it's not just now that people will listen to you if they're a long time forever fan of you. Like an app like yours, it could literally be one good episode. It might even be something that's 10 minutes or less, but if it's a really, really relevant and interesting content and people feel there's a low commitment of checking it out, then it could have a ton of success on Goodpods.
Not only that, now suddenly your show is introduced to a whole bunch of new people who very well may go ahead and subscribe.
Absolutely. And so I'm wondering about people. And so there are so many, there's so many ways to connect with new people and find out what they're listening to on your app. There's also some big name celebrities and influencers, and it seems like more and more every day that are getting involved. Do you guys have a way to verify? Like, do you know for sure that, Kim Kardashian West is Kim Kardashian West and Gwyneth Paltrow is Gwyneth Paltrow? As they're getting more and more A-list celebrities on there, do you guys have a system for verifying them and making this a place for there to be, where people can actually see what these, it's overused, but A-listers are listening to?
We do. And I can assure you, yeah, Gwyneth Paltrow just came on. That was exciting. So you can follow her.
Yes. Done.
Um, and yeah, Kim Kardashian, Malcolm Gladwell. We have a lot of really interesting people. I know for sure that all these people are real because I've spoken to them.
Wow, that's awesome. I was starting to say your network's not very impressive, but maybe now
We get we've had some big name people come on, and we just had to go ahead and confirm that it was indeed them. We do have a whole system.
well, that's very cool. So, early on here, but you've already got some of the people with the biggest social influence out there on the platform at an early stage. So congrats on that.
I think it's really fun to know. So Dan Harris, he's host of the podcast 10% Happier, which is a podcast that I love. I love his
Yeah.
interviews, right? He's just an incredible interviewer. And I, again, really love his podcast. And so I just respect him. I want to know what else he's listening to. I'm going to, of course, listen to 10% Happier, but I'm really interested in knowing what else he likes.
It's getting really meta because I'm thinking about all the guests I have on, and especially when I know they're interested in the podcast space, I love to dive into what books they're reading, what podcasts they're listening to. And you've taken one of those questions and answered it as part of your app. So you can kind of get a constant, live stream answer of that for people you're interested in. So that's a neat aspect as well.
Yeah, exactly. That is the whole thing, is just recommendations from people that you trust.
Imagine you started your own podcast. You're growing your brand, sharing your expertise, maybe even your terrible puns, and meeting fascinating people. That is awesome. Now, imagine all the hours you've lost every week due to the podcast's demands. Not so awesome. I am your podcast producer. Email me at max@hippodirect.com. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about inspiration and creativity. So, what do you do to stay creative?
You know, it's so funny. I literally just signed up for a class. The Stanford G, which is where I went and got my MBA, just has a class, this woman, Jennifer Aker, on creativity and maintaining your creativity. And it's a 7-day course that you can sign up for. It's free. And I just signed up for it yesterday because I'm really busy these days. I've got 3 children and they're home, and I'm launching this company. And so between launching the company and cooking and cleaning and playing basketball outside and homework, etc., I thought it was worth taking some time to figure out how you fit everything in your life and space to actually think. But I do these days take a long walk every single morning where I just try and think and have stuff come to me without being too specific about it. I think a lot of your best ideas come when you're not paying that much attention.
I agree. I definitely agree. And to be specific about it, how long are your long walks?
Well, I guess they're not that long now that I think about it.
4 minutes.
It's
No.
just a walk. I walk everywhere from a half an hour to an hour every day. And actually, I take it back because some of that time I spend with my friends during this time period, but that's where I get a lot of inspiration also, is from my friends.
Oh, that's yeah. Your friends are okay too. We'll give it to you. We'll put it in the long walk category. I think as long as it's over, I don't know if there's a defined time that's considered long enough for like a brain break, but regardless, if you're going out for a walk, there always seems to be that moment, that kind of mystery magical time where you kind of look up and look around and I don't know, you're just feeling good and you feel like your mind is off things, and as you said, that's when the ideas start flowing. So that seems like a hell of a way to start each morning.
Yeah, I did. And you know what? I have tried to meditate about 1,000 times in my life. And suddenly, during this period, I feel like I'm able to do it consistently.
Really?
Charles Duhigg, I've got the power of habit going all over the place these days. My
There you go.
meditation walk. And I think I can't tell you yet because it's still relatively new for me, but I think that helps too.
It's interesting that you weren't able to do it until now. I think it must. I guess it must depend on what's going on in the world and what you're thinking about at the time. I want to go back for a second to that class, the creativity class, because one, I think I need to sign up for that as well. That's right down my alley. But I'm curious, what is it like? What's in the description? What do they talk about that they're going to teach and go through in that? Because it sounds very intriguing.
While we're talking to each other here, I can find it. You know what? Saw it in Instagram. So I'm going to go over to the profile of the professor, who's this really incredible woman, and see how they marketed their class. Oh, here we go. Stanford Business School Executive Education. Join the 7 Challenge series with the Stanford GSB to live a more happy, intentional, and creative life. We just wrapped up humor, but today starts 7 days of creativity.
It's definitely intriguing. 7 days of creativity. I wonder if it's
Yep.
going to be mixed up into different like rotations and exercises, or how much is going to be lecture based. So obviously that's an area of interest for you, that you are interested in creativity enough to take a class on it. What about on the consumption side of things, what else do you take in to stay creative? So you already mentioned Charles Duhigg. You already mentioned some podcasts that you like. On that podcast note, because you are so much in the podcast space, what are some of your favorite podcasts of all time that you have stumbled upon and would you'd consider your all-time favorites? Just to be redundant on my end.
Can I say yours?
Oh, thank you so much. Yep. All right. Next question. No. Go ahead.
So I mentioned the Happiness Lab. I mean, I'm going to mention some big ones and then I'll mention some smaller ones that
Yeah, of
people
course.
maybe haven't enough. I love Malcolm Gladwell's podcast. I really love Shortwave these days. You ever listen to Shortwave?
No, what is that one? Shortwave.
It's a
That's a
it's a science podcast.
oh, I might like
That
that.
is, yeah, it's really fun and very short. I listened to one the other day called the Fireside Mystery Theater, which is sounds like an old radio show, pure entertainment. It kind of reminds me of these, cassette tapes that my father used to have us listen to when we were younger. That I think is really fun. I like, Wondery has a lot of great podcasts. Business Wars, I've listened to a lot of those. We Crashed, I loved. Oh my God, I'm going to keep going
Oh yeah.
on. We could take the whole time telling
It's
me,
like
so
you have
just
a
tell me when to
podcast
stop.
app or something.
Yeah, you could tell me to stop at any time. There's one called Decoder Ring that I just got introduced to that was really fun to listen to. I do a lot of podcast listening.
I would say so. And those examples right there, which is probably 1 millionth of your podcast listening, you have mentioned so many different categories. And so it's so eclectic. And so that is how you listen to podcasts. That's you listen to so many different categories. And it's making me think because when I started listening to podcasts, I was all sports at the start. And then I was all sports and business. And it was kind of just those two for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And now I love the box of oddities, and they've been on the show as well. But like Kat and Jethro, they literally just each pick an odd and weird and fascinating story to share each time. And so every time you're getting something new. And then I met and have had on Jim Harold, who does paranormal podcasts. And I
Mm-hmm.
by no means would I say I'm someone who's like interested in ghosts and the paranormal, anything like that. But some of his stories and some of his episodes are so fascinating. And I think it really helps to balance out, business and sports or whatever you're listening to at the time, science with something, completely out of left field or completely different. Cause it's just always interesting to hear new stuff, whether it be you're actually learning or whether it just be for entertainment at the moment.
I'm looking at your feed right now and I can see what you like. The box of oddities, the Canary Lighthouse, right? Tim
Yeah.
Ferriss show.
Oh my
I'm
God.
with you.
Tim is like, yeah, Tim's like my idol.
I just think podcasts are such a fun way to learn about different things and be entertained in lots of different audio ways. Just sometimes you want to hear a celebrity talking, sometimes you want to hear a comedian. I think it's so fun to have all that variety. I just needed a way to curate the variety, and that's where we came up with Goodpods because my friends curate it in essence.
Bam. That's the magical mix, the magical formula you stumbled upon. Well, thank you for doing that. So everybody doesn't have to go out and curate everything themselves or create a curation tool themselves. So let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
The Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
I know it just won a Grammy. Wild Business Shout Out of the Week. This is where we talk about a campaign or ad that caught our attention. And you actually mentioned Instagram ads or seeing something on Instagram a little while ago. And there's another example where a tennis ball got you. Can you share that example?
I can share that example. I was just kind of scrolling through my feed and I saw this ad, and it's for this thing called, I don't know, it's tennis skiller equipment, but it's basically a tennis ball attached to a string, attached to a weight. And it's videos of all these people standing in their backyard or in a parking lot or someone with their racket, just hitting the tennis ball, and the tennis ball comes back to them. I'm like 1,000% sure that I'm not going to be able to use it in the way that these people are. Like my tennis ball is going to go flying all different ways and it's not going to come right back to me.
It's going to detach from everything.
And yet it seemed pretty fun to get to go play tennis alone with this ball. And so I bought it. I will let you know if it is as good as it looks on the screen here.
Well, it seems definitely eye-catching, caught your attention. What was appealing about however it was presented that made you actually purchase it and risk these tennis balls flying all around the neighborhood and anything else that may happen?
I mean, by the way, it was simply the video, right? We're all kind of cooped up right now in our homes, and the idea of just getting to go outside. And I'm not, by the way, even very good at tennis. I hardly ever play, but the
Well, you're
idea of
about to
just
be.
getting to go outside and it just looked really fun. It just looked fun. That was it.
It's funny because it actually relates back to your examples of podcasts that are going around the Goodpods app. Because if something looks fun and interesting and intriguing, sometimes that's all it takes for it to get some momentum and pick up. And it could literally be something that's a new kind of funky tennis ball toy thing. And the same thing applies whether it's in audio form or video, it turns out. So they got you. So good luck chasing the balls on the strings everywhere.
They got me. We'll see how good I am at
You're going to be pro. We're going to see you versus Serena in the U.S. Open.
it.
Let's get to a segment called the unusual. So let's get a bit unusual here. What is your biggest pet peeve?
When people don't turn off the lights when they leave a room, drives me crazy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, that's does that happen every now and then with your three kids?
I think I've trained them pretty well now, but yeah, I just feel I don't know. I think my parents drilled that into me when I was little. It's just a waste of electricity.
Right. Yeah. I could see that. How about quirks? So, other than playing with tennis balls in the garage, what is there about maybe it's your personality that your husband or family calls you out on that is something that's a little quirky, but it's who you are. It's just you're not going to change that. It's who you are.
They call me out on stuff all the time. You know, they've been doing something so funny recently because I hosted this show for the BBC. Last spring, we filmed it. It was called Follow the Food. And it was this really interesting series about agriculture and the future of food and food distribution. But there's one part where I'm tasting some lettuce that was grown in an indoor farm. And the camera zooms in on me and I go, it's just so flavorful. And now my family, every time we eat something, they're like, it's just so flavorful, mom, isn't it?
Oh my god. You
um,
just created taglines left and right.
it is not an ongoing quirk, but there are lots of things that my family makes fun of me for, which I really appreciate.
Hey, that's what makes family family. There's got to be some element of that. And next time I eat something, it's going to be very flavorful. So I can't wait for that. How about weird talents? What is something that it could be like a memory trick or it could be something random like around the house? What's something maybe that people would see as minor, but it's something that you're really, really good at and it has no impact on your business whatsoever?
You know, I here's another thing that I have been made fun of. I've taken classes on just about everything in my life. You name it.
Like creativity?
Pottery, pottery, batik, belly dancing. Um,
Was going to guess
you
that
know,
next.
so anytime I find something interesting, I go take a class on it. You know, I've taken lecture series, taken this creativity class, accounting, you name it. The thing that I just learned, which I was very proud of myself, was we had a talent show, sort of a quarantine talent show in our house the other day, and I learned the renegade, which am clearly, you know, my
Oh my
parents,
god.
kids were horrified by it, by me doing it. But and it took me, by the way, forever to learn it, but I learned it.
Well, congrats on learning it. Some of these dances that are going around now, like some of these TikTok dances, people make them look so easy, but they're probably they're going to be like the hardest thing that people have ever done in their careers figuring out these dances.
Oh my God. I mean, it took me 5 hours to learn 30 seconds.
Oh my God. It's a changing world. People are singing and dancing everywhere. So let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
All right. Let's get wild. What is your favorite type of cookie?
Sugar.
Oh, that narrows it down. No, that's good. We'll
No,
take
no,
it.
like
We'll
a
take it.
sugar cookie. I
I
suddenly
know.
feel like I'm on a game show. I was like, I felt like I was on Family
Whammy.
Feud.
Survey says,
Truly, it was just like,
yeah,
yeah, sugar cookie. You know, in the final part of Family Feud, where they always just say the word really weirdly.
that's great.
When they mention the
We'll
sugar
get, I got you. Flour. We're going to just start listing off ingredients. No, we are, you'll love my co-host Louis Anderson and Steve Harvey. But what was your favorite Halloween costume that you had as a child?
Princess Leia.
Oh, that's a great one. Did you do the cinnamon rolls as ears?
Of course, that's what made it so
Not
good.
as ears, you know what I mean?
Yeah, my hair. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's a classic. All right. Was there anything that you have ever collected besides podcasts?
You know, it's funny. I'm such a minimalist that anytime,
Hmm.
I just collect. No, I don't collect things. I collect one-offs of things. So I have a lot of single things that are small that are important to me, like a little angel thing that my dad gave me, and then I have this little mouse that my best friends and I got, and another little figurine that some other friends and I got. So I have a collection of a lot of little things, but they don't all fit in one idea.
Hmm. It actually fits with an approach to podcast listening as well. Very interesting. This is like psychoanalysis now. No, I
And
did
all
not
the
study.
classes
Actually,
I took.
I was going to say I did take intro to psych, but that's where my psychology stops. So you do not want to trust me. But you, you've taken classes on everything. You collect classes too. How about a walking destination? So you mentioned you like to take walks, medium to long walks every morning. What would you say would be your ideal place to take a walk? If it could be anywhere in the world and everything is safe and nothing to be concerned about, and it could not be your neighborhood, where would you pick?
The mountains, anywhere. We went trekking in Nepal over last Christmas, and I that was amazing. But I would choose mountains anywhere.
That sounds amazing. And I bet you'll celebrate the walk with a couple sugar cookies to celebrate. All right. Well, JJ, thank you so much. This was so great. This was so great discussing Goodpods and some of the other stuff earlier in your career and the amazing things you're up to professionally and around the house as well. So thanks again for coming on. And where's the best place for people to connect with you and also to get on Goodpods and see what all the fun's about?
Goodpods is easy. You just go to the App Store and look for Goodpods, one word, Goodpods. And by the way, I ask all of you to please, once you download it and use it, give me feedback because we are brand new at Goodpods and we really would love to know what our users want out of this thing. Our whole goal is to make this great for our users. And so people can email me directly with their suggestions at jj@goodpods.com.
Perfect. And I've seen that in action. I've seen tweaks. Seems like every few weeks that I check, there's some updates and it keeps getting better and better and more customized. So that feedback clearly goes to a good spot. And last thing here, stage is yours. Final thoughts. It could be a quote. It could be sugar cookie recipe, whatever you want. Send us off here.
I listened to that podcast I mentioned earlier, Can Optimism Be Learned? I am naturally an optimist, but I even thought for me who's naturally like that hearing about optimism and thinking about how the world can be different is important and interesting for us right now.
Optimism always sounds good. Thank you, JJ, for coming on the show and sharing your Goodpods story and everything else you've been up to. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, you can check us out on Goodpods. You can also dive into our marketing and business growth resources at hippodirect.com/blog and hippodirect.com/newsletter. That newsletter is the Hippo Digest, and it's your place for wild marketing ideas every single week. And of course, come say hey on your favorite social media apps at the handles Hippo Direct and Max Branstetter. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!